So the goal I set in March when we had this kind of pivot to being AI native, the first step was you should not be using AI to assist you. You should be using it to do the task for you as the starting point for every task you do. And that was March 25th. I set that goal. At the end of April, I surveyed everyone on the team, and about 75% of all jobs across the entire company were being done in that way. Yeah, it has been difficult. Some of the team decided it wasn't the future they wanted. We helped them kind of leave and find other jobs. You know, that agency model is going to die. Like there's no doubt about that. The idea of paying for people to manually do work over and over again, I think is going to die. I think the reality is most of what we traditionally saw as junior roles, at least in the work we're doing, are not needed. It creates the need for knowledge work to be seen as an apprenticeship in the way that other kind of skills and professions have been seen as apprenticeships in the past. And that means forcing learning by hand.
That's Josh, founder of Ballpoint, and what it took to make his digital marketing agency AI native in only 3 months, on their third attempt. Today, every single one of his 12 team members uses AI first for every task. They build 2 to 3 new tools and automations a week, and they're doing work that they just weren't capable of a year ago. This is all while running 60 million of brand revenue across tens of clients. This is AI Native Speakers, the podcast where leaders of AI native companies tell you exactly what they did to get ahead with artificial intelligence. I'm Alistair Bell, your host, and when I'm not interviewing execs about AI, I'm implementing it through clients, through my agency, TuringWorks. Now, on to our first episode. And if you're looking for a playbook to implement AI, please allow Josh to tell you his. My highlights are, first of all, his model for going AI first in 3 months. He set a mandate, led from the front, and gave the team room to experiment. 2, why agencies will never be the same. Josh makes the case that charging for time doesn't really make sense anymore, and tells us what he thinks will happen to graduate schemes in the future. 3, the tools and processes behind what they've built. From the biggest unlock, which was sorting out their data layer, a super base of every meeting and project, which feeds the AI the context it needs to make good recommendations. It powers their meeting notes agent, Cosgrove, and writes actions that are pretty much spot on every time. So let's get into it. Here is the first episode of AI Native Speakers. Josh, we first met, I was having a look 12 years ago at Pact. And I remember my first impression there was that you're kind of not only running the marketing there, but I was like, man, this guy's an entrepreneur. Because you were also running your vinyl subscription service at the same time. And so over the years, I think that first impression stood true as both a marketer and an entrepreneur. I've seen you've had a couple of startups since then and various other growth roles until finally settling on the one, which is Ballpoint, which I understand is growing faster than anything you've ever done before and is a growth marketing agency helping scale companies. You've got 60 million UK pounds of brand revenue, and you're running a whole variety of meta accounts, and you've got Thriver, Motherroot, Thrift Plus. Being AI first is a huge part of that, and you're moving quicker than any marketing agency I've seen, and you're trying to grow brands 3x in a year. So welcome, Josh. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure to be here. And I can't believe it's been 12 years. That's bonkers, frankly.
Awesome. Well, let's dive straight in. The first theme we're going to go through is the importance and potential of AI. You are a insanely pro AI person, you wrote recently. And the reason I wanted to have you on is, we've worked together. I've been doing some automations for you at Ballpoint, and I could just immediately see that you're way ahead of the curve. You were thinking about automating with AI, back in the N8N days of 2025, and then you switched to Claude Code super quickly, and you've now not only been automating yourself, but you've gotten the whole team on it and even started training other people. So you clearly see the potential here, but I just wanted to first of all ask, what do you see the opportunity for Ballpoint to be with AI?
Yeah, it's a good starting point. And I think, first of all, it's taken me a long time to get here. I think, your premise is that there's a lot of people who are behind. I still feel behind today. I feel when I look at the people I'm learning from, I think, wow, we've got so far to go. And that sense of anxiety, which I know lots of people feel, because I feel it too. And I used to feel it significantly more, that we're not doing enough, the world's changing and we're going to get left behind, is still something I feel today. But yeah, importantly, it was something I felt for a large part of last year. And it's taken multiple attempts to get here as well. I think, we attempted in kind of Q3 of last year to kind of see where we could get to with AI, and didn't really have that successful an outcome from it, and wrote about it saying, technology's not here yet, we can't really do anything, and was very frustrated by it. And I think that's probably when you and I did some work together not long after that.
That first moment that you were like, we should do something with AI, what did you see?
So the founding of Ballpoint was quite interestingly timed, because we launched in January 2023, which for the longest time I've seen as this pivotal moment in growth, because it's where creative and performance kind of came back together again. And that was a really important time for how Ballpoint was founded. We had both creative and technical from day one. And it also was 2 months after ChatGPT was launched. And so we've had AI to some degree as part of our business since day one. And for that first year, we used it like, and anybody else did. It was very much kind of a chatbot. Didn't really use it much actually in kind of day-to-day work in terms of getting kind of assets produced. This was pre-agentic, pre-understanding skills and workflows and stuff like that. So it was very much just using it as an alternative to Google. And then last year, 2025, I think the noise which we heard, or I was kind of looking at from the industry which we're in, was really about kind of production. It was around using AI to produce ads. And there were this kind of rise of some specialist startups which were, creating UGC ads, to kind of fake AI personas, influencer type people. There were some which were auto-generating huge volumes of just kind of static visual ads. And we tested loads and they were never kind of quite there, but it was in the kind of back of mind that this was happening around us, and it felt like there was going to be some other agency which would do it, or some company which would do it, and that was going to become a threat to our business. And so the first kind of point when we really tried doing something with it was in September, October of last year, and Fiona, our head of ops, and myself went and spent 2 days trying to see what we could automate. And, that was, I can't remember if Nana Banana was out at that point, but we were trying to like chain together image gen into workflows using N8N, tried chaining together meta ads API stuff into N8N. And for anyone who's used N8N will know how frustrating a process that is. And
did it work?
Basically, no. We managed to get a really simple Slack-based image gen kind of tool built, where if you wanted background images for ads, but it was really only at a level which was good for kind of inspiration images rather than the actual ads themselves. And I now know that's because it was completely lacking context. It didn't have any indication for what things should look like, or brand imagery, or kind of product imagery. None of that was being factored in. So yeah, we spent 2 days. We got highly frustrated. We tried automating some kind of back-end ops workflows. We tried automating some ad stuff, tried automating some kind of ads analysis stuff, and all of it kind of basically failed. We didn't really it didn't change the world by any stretch. And we basically stayed like that until January of this year, which is when I kind of went into my big Claude Code kind of frenzy.
Yeah. So let's talk about the frenzy. First of all, the AI getting to 80% is so frustrating. I find you can have an internal tool where you can get away with it being 80% okay, generating something internally, some text. But when it becomes client facing, or if in your case, like an advert, it's got to be 100%. And so that difference is the difference between being able to use it and not. So I think there was a lot of hype in 2025 where people were doing these essentially demos and very complicated N8N workflows, which on a YouTube video looked incredible, but you couldn't use them with a client, or you couldn't make the advert with them that you could actually put live. So like that sounds like it changed at the beginning of this year for you. Like what changed?
The thing which we didn't really understand last year, or at least I didn't understand, was this kind of difference between what's deterministic and probabilistic or non-deterministic, however you think about it, where, sometimes you'd produce something which looked great, and then we'd have like a small tweak which we wanted to make to it. And you're basically, now actually some of you can edit existing images much better. The models are much better at it, but back then you couldn't. And so you'd have to just redo the prompt, and then a slight tweak to the prompt produced an entirely different output as you'd expect. And that obviously then becomes even more frustrating because you're like 95% of the way there, and because the models are inherently non-deterministic, you can't just like tweak it in the right way to get to where you need it to. And so that was kind of the other kind of issue with those workflows. But beginning of this year, I think there are a couple of things I was reading which were starting to kind of get me excited about the idea of getting stuck into Claude Code. And I think there were people talking about the fact that Claude Code is not just for engineers, and that was kind of exciting. I wanted to give it a go out of curiosity. There was and I can't remember who wrote it now. There was an article which came out in January where the guy said, we are in that January 2020 moment or February 2020 moment where there is this thing happening in China, which we're all kind of ignoring and have our heads in the sand for, and it is about to completely take over the world. And this is the moment of hindsight. You can look at that moment and realize we're in it. And, I was looking at that and thought, okay, I kind of get it. And so I got Claude Code. As you start going down these rabbit holes, your entire social media feeds become AI people. And one of the first things that I came up against was this person talking through building, essentially what we now think of as like the second brain piece, which obviously Kapathi's kind of talks on now have been the kind of standard for it. Yeah. The version I read in January was this guy who'd basically, ingested every single one of his historic 100,000 Gmails from the last 15 years, every single piece of comms he'd ever done, and built it into this vector-based database. And so I was like, oh, that seems really cool. I'll give that a go. I'm sure I can kind of crack that out over the weekend. And so I spent kind of 6 or 7 hours that Saturday playing around with it to get to the end, and obviously realized still not there. And woke up on Sunday and kind of tinkering around some more and still wasn't kind of getting there. I didn't really understand what vector database or vector search was. And actually, just getting 10,000 emails out of my historic Gmail was an absolute pain. That takes a long time. All of these kind of things I was kind of coming up against as kind of issues and trying to troubleshoot them on the fly. But during that process, I was starting to every kind of extra step I was doing, as I was learning a little bit more, as I was learning, okay, actually ingesting data from different locations is going to be a really important part of this process. As I was starting to do that, I was starting to think through, well, if we got all of our data from all of our client experiments into a certain system, that could be pretty valuable. And as I started to think through, how do we actively ingest stuff on a day-to-day basis, and learning about skills, and, skills were in Claude Desktop for a long time, and I never particularly found them that useful. Suddenly I was like, cool, I understand now a skill can ingest what's happened today, and I can run that whenever I want to and ingest more data. And every step I was doing, I was starting to realize more and more potential of it. And so that was kind of one initial project I had. I started vibe coding a cooking app for myself around the same sort of time. And those two things were really my first two kind of projects I was trying to do. One was this personal AI second brain thing. The other one was this cooking app. And it was across the course of probably 2 or 3 weeks in January where I started to realize how much of the work we did at Ballpoint could be automated, how much of it could you could probably get 60 or 70% of an answer pretty natively in AI. You ask AI a question with a set of data, it's going to give you 60 or 70% of what we might recommend as an agency. And I realized as we got there, other clients are going to start doing this. Clients are going to start looking, and they may not have our marketing expertise and our growth expertise, but a 60% output, which looks really good, may well convince some clients in the future that it's a better state of affairs. And so I kind of realized we needed to be on the front foot of this change and make sure that we kind of preemptively got ahead of whenever a client or a prospective client was going to get there. So we knew where the strengths of the systems were and where the flaws of the systems were. Starting at the weekends and suddenly finishing work and continuing to tinker and play around. And yeah, it was a very full-on month, which by the end of it, it was very much a light bulb, an overnight 1 month light bulb moment.
It sounds like something clicked, almost like there was a realization of what it could do, but there was also part of you which kind of like has always wanted this. It was like it all came together and you're like, wow, this is it. Like I can use this.
Yeah. I remember my very first job. I was working I had an in-house marketing job at a PR agency. And I remember I started off there as like a copywriter and content marketer. And I remember seeing on the grad scheme what the job of grads was. And every Friday, because it was a PR agency, they would go and do these like clippings reports for clients where they would have made a list of all of the times their client was mentioned throughout the week. And the grad had to go and click on the link, take a screenshot of it, stick it into a page, copy the headline, paste the headline in there, copy the first sentence, put the link in, and then add like a sentence or two of context, which they kind of manually added in. And, each grad had to do this across 15 clients. It was their entire Friday. And I remember at the time thinking that has got to be automatable. Like there's no way that can't be automatable. And I didn't know, I've never been an engineer, like I'm not a developer, but I kind of knew enough about how technology worked that if something is a repeatable process you're doing over and over again, it has to be automatable to a certain extent. So I've had this kind of inkling in my mind for a long, long time. And with the work which kind of Ballpoint are doing, and when I was going through this Claude Code phase, I think there were two things that kind of happened. I think one was it really taught me to be an even stricter
Have you always been a
systems
systems
thinker than I was before. And, to a certain extent, yeah, I always kind of logically see things in kind of groupings quite kind of easily. And I think about kind of processes quite a lot. I've always been that way inclined. And so, I did the Harvard CS50 course, or like the first half of it until I got really deep into C, like 10 years ago, kind of for fun. So I've definitely got parts of that in the way I think anyway. As you're starting to think through stuff in like in like workflow terms, realizing actually if you break apart our constituent parts of what we do as an agency, a huge amount of human time is actually spent doing these like very systematic workflows. And that is not the work which we're being paid for. Like that's for the timely consuming piece, but it's not the actual true reason why we're being hired, which is every person who manages stuff has huge amounts of expertise. They've got that ability to pattern match different environments together. They have more built-in technical knowledge, which means they can arrive at the right result faster and so on. And yet most of our time is being spent on following very deterministic systems, kind of patterns over and over again, whether that's in creative production or creative ops or getting things signed off.
I want to talk about your team and how they are getting on with becoming AI first, which is something that you've committed yourself to. I saw in your blog that within 3 months, you're going to make sure the entire team's AI first, which I think is next month. So it was a big goal. Let's unpick it a little bit. So, I mean, first of all, what is being AI native?
Yeah, the original definition I came up with was it's using AI to do a job for you rather than to assist you in doing that job. And the way I think, go back to the first wave of AI you're using as a chatbot. The second wave, you realize it's quite good at take a data analysis piece of work as an example. First wave, you kind of have a chat about how you should go about doing something, and it says you should go and use SQL and go and do these things. Then you realize it's quite good at writing SQL. So and this is like the AI assisted layer where you go into your SQL tool, you take a screenshot of the schema, you give that schema to Claude, you tell Claude what you're trying to do, it writes some SQL for you, you paste it into your SQL tool, you wait for a response, you give a response back to Claude, and you kind of go back and forth in this loop. And I think that's where a lot of the team were last year with a lot of their tasks. They knew AI was powerful. They were asking it good questions. They were kind of giving it the inputs of their existing tools. But ultimately, there was still this bridge in between the two things. So the goal I set in March, when we had this kind of pivot to being AI native, the first step was you should not be using AI to assist you. You should be using it to do the task for you as the starting point for every task you do. And that was March 25th. I set that goal. At the end of April, I surveyed everyone on the team, and about 75% of all jobs across the entire company were being done in that way. It's now about kind of 85 or 90%. So like for me, that's completed. That's a done job of, this is the new normal now. Every conversation is an AI conversation. So yeah, it's very much been a kind of top-down decision, which was put onto the team, but the team we have are completely bought in, which is
That's
very
really
exciting
great. You
to
just
see.
gave a whole framework for going AI first. It was make a positive case for using AI, give people the space to learn, experiment, get on the tools, lead by example, like you're on Claude Code all hours, and repeat the goal until it's done. And here you are. You made it sound very easy. I think that's the end of the podcast. It's not really. We've got another hour. But, well, I mean, is there anything difficult about it?
Yeah, it has been difficult. Some of the team decided it wasn't the future they wanted. We helped them kind of leave and find other jobs. So we had some team members not want that future, and kind of considering actually like different professions entirely, or kind of businesses which are kind of taking different approaches to it. So there was definitely like a team reset. We're not at a scale where it was a case of, we need to think about redundancies or anything like that. We're a small team. We're a full-time team of 12. And it was really important to me that everyone was singing from the same hymn book and rowing in the same direction. And so we made it as favorable as we could be. That if you didn't want to be part of that change, you didn't have to be. And that was tough. That week when that was going on and people were, thinking about what they wanted from their careers, was obviously a really, really tough week. It was one of those weeks where when I journal at the end of every day, it was not a pleasant reading, kind of going back through those pages in the journal. So that was obviously really tough, kind of the team shifts and changes. It's been really tough to find the time to properly commit to the changes. I've asked people to do this homework outside of work. We now have every other Friday, we essentially have as a kind of a build sessions. We have a 3-hour slot on a Friday where we always do building together. And that's been quite unguided for the first couple of months. It's about to change, but it's been quite unguided in the sense of like use this for experimentation and exploration. But we are a lean team. We still have clients who need active servicing. We haven't found like 20% more time in our weeks so far, thanks to AI, that allows us to like spend a day a week on learning, or even more than that. So I think the hardest part has been, balancing the day-to-day workload of how we operate as a business, which, pays our bills and keeps everyone in a job, with also learning and essentially kind of building a new type of business and a new product and service area. And, if we were a business with investment or something, then there's a good chance we'd probably hire double the headcount right now so that we can continue servicing it as normal, and then the rest of the team spent building all this stuff out. So yeah, that's kind of been one of the ongoing challenges, is how we balance those two things together. And I can only imagine in bigger workplaces that could be even more challenging.
I love the Friday for projects. Despite my whole shtick being helping companies get ahead with AI, I often feel behind on AI, and being able to work on some projects on Friday, I find a brilliant way of learning, because I don't really buy, just kind of reading about it. You've got to actually get there on the tools and use it. And so self-motivated projects you want to work on, I find a great way. So I'm glad that's working in Ballpoint as well. I just want to talk a little bit more broadly about what AI first means. I saw you quoted on your blog the other day that you think Ballpoint will be half software, half agency in 3 months. Is AI completely changing the business model of a marketing agency?
I think any services business is going to change significantly in the coming months and years. At a minimum, no matter what it is you're hiring another B2B partner for, the idea of billing time based on an hourly basis is soon going to feel, for most businesses, like old-fashioned, or some kind of model which is based on that. And I know this already. I know when we're looking to hire a third party, I want them to be AI enabled, because I don't want, if a lawyer uses AI to speed up their workflows, and so instead of spending 1 hour reading something through, they have a well set up AI system which allows them to overview it with some taste and some judgment in 5 minutes. That's far preferable to me than paying for the hour of time. So I look at the service providers we would buy from and know that to be the case. And so I think this is a change which will happen across every single industry. And for us, it's a case of, I'm thinking, how do we continue to build a business which grows year over year and succeeds and ultimately provides exciting work and returns for myself and the team? And that agency model is going to die. Like there's no doubt about that. The idea of paying for people to manually do work over and over again, I think, is going to die. Maybe there'll be some odd cases where you have like almost the bespoke kind of barista model of it, where paying for somebody to do it by hand is seen as a kind of luxury good. But for most businesses, I don't think that'll be the case.
Yeah.
So when you kind of start with that premise and you say, right, what does that look like for us as a business? You think, okay, we have this expertise, we have this knowledge base, we have this history of data. How can we turn that into a system of some kind, whatever we want to call it, whether it's software or agents or skills or whatever we want to call that, whatever it looks like? How do we build that system which we can then use to make our jobs more effective and make us better at our jobs? And then when you do have that, what does that do to the business model? It's either one route is it makes us far more efficient, we can do more, and we're better, not just more efficient, we're better, and therefore we're more likely to win more work because we can provably demonstrate, because of our software, we can do X, Y, and Z. Our results are going to be so much better for you. That's one route. The other route is we have some software which we can, almost go and install into our clients and say, you've got this tool now yourself. We're going to help you get the most out of it. And you have this almost kind of software with consulting model on top of it. So that becomes this kind of secondary avenue. Don't know which way this will go yet, but either way, there's definitely going to be some software, some tooling, whatever that thing is, which powers our workflows. And then there's a chance that becomes something which we can give to clients or sell to clients separately. Yeah, that will definitely change.
It's really good insight. I agree that the model of services where you're just selling an expert's time doesn't work, because you're not just selling an expert's time, you're selling an expert's time and the systems they've built. And you need to be able to charge for that, because those systems are now what gives you the competitive advantage. So we've managed to mix up services and what used to be SaaS, and we've got this whole new tech-enabled services model, which I think Palantir are probably the biggest, earliest example, and everyone else is working it out, and how we charge for that and how you run these kind of businesses.
I think Palantir is one of the good business models, if not ethically necessary, the ones to use for inspiration. But, from a model perspective, building software which you go and install and then you do some consulting around, and, I think makes sense. And I think especially when this was another kind of big learning as well, AI is not some static thing. If it was some static thing which stopped today, then essentially I think everyone would just become, you do the software you do the SaaS plus consulting thing. But the fact that in 3 months' time, the models will have changed so much, but the outcomes change, it means the software needs such redevelopment, and the use of that software which you're creating, or the use of those skills, needs that continual redevelopment, that it kind of creates the need for that kind of, that type of model as well. So I think there are good ones to borrow from.
Awesome. All right, we're going to move on to people in AI first companies. And I was thinking back to TechClash starting, which happened around about the Cambridge Analytica scandal with Facebook. It's kind of just gotten worse from there, the reputation of tech, because they're not only now being blamed for stealing data, but also stealing jobs with AI. And AI comes up repeatedly now with alongside redundancy reports. Most recently there was Atlassian, Meta, who have mentioned it as a reason for reducing the number of team members. And the people who are suffering the most are entry level, and they're being shown as being most vulnerable because they're the ones who are doing the kind of most repeatable tasks, the most entry-level tasks, such as you were saying before around, doing the clippings books. The public reaction to AI is a lot more negative than I thought it was going to be. And I think it's that jobs element which is going into it. And I kind of want to reflect on that, Josh, with, you've been in marketing agencies before, and now you're running a marketing agency with AI. So comparing those two, do we still need entry-level workers?
I think before kind of tackling that question, I think the broader point's a really important one, because it's something which I personally think every business owner is going to need to have some responsibility for, to a certain degree. And there's a brilliant book by a guy called Eric Hoffer called The True Believer, and it is a book on how mass movements are formed. And it tracks the rise of communism and Nazism and the types of people who go and join these mass movements. And something it says in there is the people who join movements and become radicalized are not the people who have always been poor. It is the people who have had something and then lost it. And so what we're going through at the moment is essentially what the labor force and the kind of factory workers and agricultural workers have been going through with globalization for the last 30 years, where everything started getting outsourced to China or to parts of Africa or parts of Southeast Asia. And it was great for the global economy. The macro kind of economic story was fantastic. And now we're starting to see the backlash of those things. So, we understand the human cost of what that's doing when people lose their ability to work, or their sense of work and purpose is fundamentally changed. And that's about to happen now to knowledge workers and, the managerial middle classes and the people who are university educated and to a large degree have collectively a large amount of power, because they are people who on average come from wealthy families and kind of have more influence and so on. And so this is going to become like a much bigger, like political system-wide problem that needs to be addressed. And, I don't think it's quite good enough for these big AI companies to say, well, this is what we recommend you doing. I think no government at the moment is anywhere close to recognizing the enormity of the challenge, at least in how they're acting. And so there's going to need to be a change. And I think it ultimately comes back to the business owners and senior people and CEOs and C-suites of different businesses to be actively thinking about this. Because if we don't, then in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, based on some trajectories, not all trajectories, is going to cause like a really big delayed problem. So that's the kind of backdrop I have. And I think the reality is most of what we traditionally saw as junior roles, at least in the work we're doing, are not needed. With things like building ads in ad accounts, which was once upon a time 4 or 5 hours a day or 2 or 3 hours a day of an entry-level person's work, and they got to understand ad account structures and got to understand errors and settings, and they ask questions. They're like, what does that mean? What's an attribution window? And so on. That very quickly, a year or so ago, stopped being important because there was tools which sped it up. Now I can be reviewing creative in a platform like Slack and basically say, great, publish this live into the ad account, and it does it. And so I no longer need a junior person to go and do that job. And that's only going to become more true once more of these things get automated. So there's not a need for junior employees in the sense of there is work there for that junior employee to be done in the same way. And the place I land at this from is it creates the need for knowledge work to be seen as an apprenticeship in the way that other kind of skills and professions have been seen as apprenticeships in the past. And that means forcing learning by hand. You don't get your AI to go and do some SQL analysis until you know a little bit of SQL, or you don't get it to go and fully do some data analysis while understanding a little bit of statistics before you go and do that thing. The way I see it is we're going to need to have this kind of apprenticeship scheme system within businesses where we force people to do stuff by hand and learn it by rote. And the outcome of that being they can then kind of progress into using AI to kind of do those jobs for them. I think my most likely way that kind of rolls out.
It's a good point. We've abstracted away from first principles. So you can be doing the thing without knowing the elements that go into it. So only by unpicking those can you understand the first principles and therefore be able to know how the whole thing operates. It's the basis of all, I think of my engineering degree. It was, at the time, I thought it was a lot of maths, but it was really teaching me the first principles of building a bridge, which turns out are maths. So rebuilding that up. Is this something you're going to do at Ballpoint? Like, how are you enacting this? Like, what is the structure at the moment? Is it mostly senior? And like, what opportunities do you see now to kind of bring the juniors in a different way, even though those basic tasks aren't needed anymore?
I easily could be wrong. And, to that level of abstraction point, you can build incredibly good software systems without knowing anything about assembly. And you can do incredible analysis in Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets without knowing how to do long division. There's lots of skills which were important once upon a time, which we now look back on as old-fashioned and redundant, and that doesn't change what we can do as part of that analysis. So there is an perhaps not equally good, but a good chance that this is wrong. And actually the idea of learning through doing these very manual tasks is going to be outdated, and actually there'll be enough guardrails in place in the future and new ways to learn that we don't have to kind of do this apprenticeship thing. Maybe there'll be other ways to do it. I think whichever those routes are, there are going to need to be new skills which everyone learns. I think I kind of keep coming back to this idea of like interdisciplinary learning or multidisciplinary learning. And I actually spent a couple of years doing a digital marketing and product role for an education business a few years ago, which had as part of its business some schools. And so learned about some kind of learning systems and learned about kind of Montessori and kind of follow-on systems where it's very kind of drawing all these different ideas together, and you're learning through doing, and you learn, by building a sandcastle, you learn bits of physics, you learn bits of architecture, you learn bits of design. And I think that got lost somewhere along the way when workforce was completely specialized, education was completely specialized. But actually that's the kind of system we have today. You need to know enough about graphic design, enough about how software is at least kind of the visual of what it looks like in a system. You need to know how to speak to a customer or a user so that you can properly build something for that person. You need to know enough about how to communicate so that you can communicate those ideas with other people. So we are going to have this need for a kind of multidisciplinary way of learning. And I think that's going to translate into whatever the internal learning schemes within businesses should be, whether it's apprenticeship or whether it is some type of grad scheme or whatever that thing might be. And not just at the junior end, at the kind of senior end as well. You're going to have specialists now who could have been doing 10 years as, a head of marketing or something, who now needs to learn a bits of code or bits of graphic design, or graphic designers who it would be wise to learn bits of marketing and bits of code to kind of support their jobs. Every year since we launched, we've done a grad scheme. It's around about now that we usually open up for applications for that grad scheme. We're not choosing to do one in this usual cohort when we do it. And I think the core reason is there's just too many unknowns at the moment. I wouldn't know in 3 months' time what that would even look like. And I think we need to get a little bit further ahead until we have a kind of clearer idea. I also think if it is the apprenticeship route, then there needs to be some type of recognition of that worker not giving a return for a much longer period of time. And so, whether that's some type of government grant or kind of tax breaks, if you take part in schemes like that, I think would be a brilliant kind of government-led initiative which could help with it.
Let's say a very forward-thinking student is listening to this. What advice would you give of them, if they want to join?
I think when we do open up our next scheme, our grad scheme, having built something with AI is going to be part of that application process. And I think the people who are most likely to be at the top of that pile are those who have built something, significant and some type of personal project, which is vibe coded or, demonstration of how they could do some, large scale data analysis or something, which through Claude Code or, or building a second brain or something like that. I think there's going to be some need to demonstrate that you've built something with Claude Code, some kind of system which, we can look at and see how it works, and as kind of proof of concept. So I think that's essential. And if I was 21, 22 and I was graduating and trying to get into the workforce, spend 2 days a week just learning everything you can about Claude Code. Go on YouTube and go down the rabbit hole and watch something and go and do it yourself. And the upside of that might also be you suddenly get an entrepreneurial bug, or you kind of realize, actually, I bet I can do something like this to go and help somebody. But, if not, you're kind of coming into the work for probably knowing more about AI than most businesses. Like I'm very aware that we're in a bubble. And when I speak to most people, they're still using GPT and Claude as a chatbot. So yeah, I think that'd be the most important thing I would do as a junior.
That's awesome advice. Get Claude Code, get on GitHub, public repo, build stuff, share it. I think that'd be really impressive and give you a good idea of what it's about. And being able to demonstrate systems thinking. And yeah, you are going to be ahead of most companies. Ballpoint you're the most AI first company I've met. I hope to meet lots more of them on this podcast, but majority I speak to are just working out where to get started.
It's funny because I open up Twitter or X and all I see is businesses ahead of us. And so I'm like, there are so many people kind of further down this path than we are. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, let's go on to kind of a bit more of a rapid fire section about tools and automations, kind of what's working, what's a waste of time. I saw in your blog that you're shipping as a team 2 to 3 new skills or tools or processes a week. And you said that can be like a new data analysis technique or an experiment evaluation. Loads. So you're being very productive. Could you choose a favorite?
My favorite, and probably one of the ones which it's quite simple but just works very, very well. We name all of our skills or agents after historical figures, and we have one. There's some banging, which just started from the outside, so apologies about that. We have a what we call our account manager, agent called Cosgrove, named after Ken Cosgrove in Mad Men. And Cosgrove does meeting notes, which obviously all the transcription tools do meeting notes. They've never been any good because they don't have context, as is really important with AI. And so Cosgrove does have context. It's got this memory of what's been discussed in previous meetings, and it's got access to Notion and Slack, which is where all of our work takes place. And so Cosgrove, when it finishes a meeting, looks at the insights, looks at what was discussed, then searches within the stuff we've set up for it. So it knows to go into Notion for certain things. It knows it'll check Slack for conversations. It's got the history, the memory of, that was discussed last week. It's part of this work stream. And as a result, the list of action items we get from it is absolutely spot on. It's like, it's short. It's only the most important things. The context is right, I'd say 99% of the time. And we built that through, I created like a scoring, I got AI to create a scoring system, like an evals scoring system based on here are 10 best practice write-ups and the reason why they're so good. Create a scoring system based on them. And now I want you to, this was my instructions, Claude, I want you to keep on refining the prompt until you get the output to be 95% score against the scoring system.
Evals. Beautiful. That worked really well. How'd you give it the context?
All of our sub-skills and agents sit within a kind of hero Ballpoint folder, which has a reasonably high level of context in it. It's got, Claude MD, which talks about what we do and guides people off into like, this is how we do data analysis, create a strategy, and so on. So there's like a reasonably good amount, which any session we open in Claude has by default. And yeah, in that particular, I was prescriptive in a sense of, if somebody asks about this, it's probably going to be, over here, kind of go and look for it. But it got it without much. It was probably kind of half an hour of prompting from me, and I let it be for about 4 or 5 hours. And it came back, and it was just spot on.
Is there anything you've not been able to crack, like a thing you've come back to a few times or failed miserably?
Yeah, I'm still trying. I'm still chipping away at like my personal AI or my chief of staff AI, whatever you want to call it. And I tried Hermes, and the frustrating was before I tried Hermes, I got reasonably far by building it in Claude Code, but it just didn't have good ingestion layers to it because the types of ingestion just didn't work in managed agents remotely. And there was a mixture of kind of quite a lot of code which needed to be enacted. And so I thought, maybe OpenClaw Hermes is a way to solve this problem. I went and spent the kind of 2 weeks setting up Hermes. And at the end of it, I was like, this is crap. It's not doing what I want it to do. I've now kept the VPS, and I've got my chief of staff on the VPS. And, my desired outcome is I can, through WhatsApp, say something like, what's the current performance of client X? And it'll just go in and kind of share the answer back to me. Or, if I'm on holiday, I can say like, how's work going or something? And it can just come back and say, everything's going great. We've just won a new client. This client's having a great week, that sort of thing. Like that's the dream state of it, is this like perfect kind of chief of staff, personal assistant. It'll get there. I just haven't got it there yet.
What do you think didn't work about Hermes?
I think I was underwhelmed by it. I kept coming back to like, am I just not using this right? The people I know who had used it had never really tried building that kind of chief of staff or second brain or whatever it was thing beforehand. I didn't find it revolutionary. I wasn't particularly excited by it. And it ended up, it was suddenly missing all the context, which I have locally. Like we've got this like brilliant selection of context instilled on my computer, which we share through GitHub with the other team members. It just didn't have that. So that was kind of one thing. I was like, I've got to recreate all this context. It's obviously got all these like predetermined skills, which you then have to like try and fit into your system. And I was like, I've kind of built my own version. Why am I trying to like crowbar generic skills into something where I've got a very specific use case for? It didn't have a context and was almost too generalized.
That's the thing I'm struggling with, where you have a general purpose tool like Hermes, and you have to claw out use cases for it because you can't give it context to everything, because you're using Claude Code for some things, Claude for others, and then you might have Notion. And so it's hard to pry away certain tasks, like the chief of staff, because I have to set up my Claude Code with all of those tools. So I've got to set up my MCPs again. I've got to give it different information. I've got to set up my skills again. It's a bit annoying. Even though it's a better tool for certain things, I kind of just want one tool for everything. I want one AI that can do everything. I don't want on-the-go AI and a at my desktop AI and all these other AIs.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I'm more and more, I don't even think in like one model now. Like I use GPT 5.5 for certain things. I use Opus for certain things. I use Gemini for other ones. Like I'm very like model agnostic now. And I guess I'm kind of becoming more and more tool agnostic. And I think actually the most important things is like creating like a really good data layer beneath everything. Like that's probably the most important part, is like build the data layer, because everything else on top we can swap in and out when a new model comes along. But the data layer is going to persist for kind of quite some time. And so, yeah, for me, I've accepted I'm going to have different AIs. It's more about getting the system set up fast enough that I'm not going to have new shiny objects to go and
And what's
play
your
with.
stack then for data and then the tools on top?
Supabase is where almost all of so we use Supabase as a database tool, and almost all data we have kind of goes into there. We have BigQuery for all of our client data, and we have Supabase for all of our kind of email, Slack, Notion, all that stuff. That's where that gets ingested to, and call transcripts and so on. And on top of that, and the ingestion is all Python scripts, which say are kind of run using cron on the VPS. And then on top of that we use a selection of agents and skills predominantly made with Claude Code, which, as I said, we share everything. We have a shared GitHub repo internally, and we make like when pushes get changed, kind of when changes get pushed, we let everyone else know so they can get the latest version and experiment with it and give issues and do bug fixes and stuff like that. But yeah, generally speaking, Supabase is the main data layer. Haven't yet got PG Vector or anything like that set up. I think that's for next weekend I have free.
Is PG Vector a different vector database? I thought you could run a vector database on Supabase.
Yes, it's just a Postgres database at the moment. It's not got PG Vector. It's not a vector database at the moment. It's got full raw transcripts in it. It doesn't have the vector element at the moment. So I'm using it essentially as you would do, just having like transcripts in Markdown. But we've kind of got to the point where, we've got 2,000 or 2,500 meeting transcripts, each one an hour long, that need to be stored. And that grows by 30 hours of transcripts a week or 40 hours of transcripts a week.
But say you've got someone listening who is a CEO of a like $20 million brand. They're heading into work on the tube on Monday morning. They haven't really done anything with AI yet, apart from they've got ChatGPT. Where did they start?
I think you need to, look, we have the fortune of being a small, agile business. I don't know whether what we did would be able to roll up to a business 10 or 15 times the size of ours. But I also, $20 million brand shouldn't be too bloated. I would find somebody on the senior team who was the most intrigued and curious about it, and free up 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week of their time so they can go and play around for 3 months or a month and see where they get to. And at that point, once they've understood what's possible, then have a serious conversation about, right, what in our business can we fully automate? What does that look like? And not just fully automate, like a lot of this conversation has been about this first stage of like automating the time away. The next stage is, how do you do that much better than you did before? How do you make it better than the human output? And so, but yeah, stage one is going through that phase. I think that's what I would do in that position.
And let's cut to the future then. We've gone through that first step of automating. We've tried to make things better. Things are moving exponentially quickly. Where do you reckon Ballpoint will be in 2 years?
I mean, there's a good chance that we have AGI, and in which case all of this becomes an academic conversation because we're going to be living in a world of abundance where none of us have jobs anymore. If that's not the case, which I hope isn't, I hope isn't the case to a certain extent, then I think it's a position where we're probably able to service 10 times as many companies as we currently do for the headcount. The functions within our business are a mixture of deep expertise, who are people who essentially become product managers, and then a service layer, client servicing layer on top of that, of how that kind of gets translated to kind of client demands and helping clients grow. And the output which we will be doing will be 5 to 10 times better than it is today. Higher probability of success, better quality, more likely to help you grow. That's where we'll be in 2 years.
This is awesome. And to close things off, what do you do when you're waiting for AI to reply?
Open up a new session and do something else at the same time.
That's the productive thing.
I have like 8 Visual Studio Codes windows open pretty much simultaneously. And I'm just like, I've started now to use different desktops to group different works together. But generally speaking, like I'm working on kind of 8 different things simultaneously most of the time, which is probably not efficient from a context switching perspective, but there we go.
You've been a incredible first guest, so much knowledge. I'm looking forward to kind of getting that down. And I think, we will be able to add it from future guests as well and have this kind of database of like, this is how you go AI first. And that'll be really, really useful for people. So thank you for as with many things, kind of jumping in early. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, all good. And thank you. And hope this all goes well. Let me know how I can help to promote when it goes live.